Why do you podcast? That's one of the questions I ask all my guests in this podcast series. In over 100 episodes, I've gotten more than 100 different answers, and I'm still curious for more. I'm Annalies, a strategic podcast manager in Belgium, and I confess, a podcast junkie. Please join me in listening to this new episode and discovering yet another podcast why. Along the way, you will also get lots of tips and inspiration to apply to your own podcast or to get you started. Enjoy! Hello, Geneva.
Hi, hello.
Welcome to Why Do You Podcast?
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. We met not so long ago at the podcast show in London, where you also live. So I'm very excited to have another international guest on the show. It's been a while, actually.
Well, thank you for having
Yeah.
me. And yeah, that was such a fun event, wasn't it?
It was. I learned a lot from the conversations that I had. I really had so much fun meeting all these people that I already follow on social media. So yeah, it definitely was worth making the trip. Yeah.
Yeah, and the talks and everything were really
Yeah.
great as well.
Yeah. Well, as I also mentioned in some conversations that I had and in the podcast I recorded about it, that one is in Dutch, but some of these talks and sessions could have been a podcast, like, when you went to a meeting and you afterwards you say this meeting could have been an email. but yeah, still it was good to be in the room and meet all the people and also have the chance, just by being in the room, to meet the people on the stage afterwards. So
Oh yeah, that was very nice. I just love how everyone was just like so friendly and like chatting
yeah,
with each other.
yes, and so open. Yeah, I love that too. So you have a podcast. Tell
I
me, what's the title? What is it about?
I do, yes. So the show that I have is called For Kindness Sake Podcast. It hasn't been around for very long. I launched it about like September of last year, 2025. And the solid premise of the show really is just about, I guess you could say, good people who do nothing but great things. But essentially, I invite sort of guests on who get to talk about their exciting passions or like initiatives. And it kind of essentially shines a light on like a wider theme of like kindness and empathy through sort of like different lenses and different walks in life, really. So that could be anything from like workplaces or like maybe like certain challenges. And yeah, it's just like I love just having people on that kind of like share stories about sort of courage and empathy.
Yeah. So is this podcast like a personal project for you, or is it linked to your professional activities?
I would say it is more of a personal project, but I guess my main job is that I've worked in the creative industry for many years as a writer. So I kind of just from like a sort of creative medium point of view wanted to branch out into the audio space from a storytelling point of view because as a writer I've always been super passionate about telling stories. And I guess working with sort of like a different medium with audio was just kind of like a nice sort of challenge to push myself in creating these sort of like stories and narratives. So that's what really excited me to kind of have this sort of like passion project.
Okay, it all sounds really nice. And have you because you say the podcast hasn't been around that long? How many episodes now?
So it hasn't been out for very long. So I also kind of launch on a seasonal basis and I've been sort of trialing so I have 2 seasons so far and like each season I've sort of trialed like different sort of formats just to see like which kind of works better. So in
Okay.
season 1 we had about like 8 episodes but within those 8 episodes I kind of did like a 4 main episodes and then 4 like mini bonus episodes, but still kind of like launching on a weekly basis and within that seasonal timeline just to see how that sort of works. And then for this second season that just launched this year in March, I decided to do a monthly launch instead, just to see how that kind of would go with listeners, but also using a lot more social media sound bites instead. So creating kind of like a monthly theme on like all of my different channels. So there's like a lot more focus because something I noticed from the season prior is that people were still kind of engaging with the previous topics from like the weeks before. And I was like, oh, why can't we just extend that and maybe kind of expand the social channels a bit more and create a lot more sound bites? And I think the sound bites of this season have definitely been getting a lot more attention by creating like sort of like a mini series because with the sort of sound bites per episode, I create around like 12 clips. And then
Over,
there's
yeah,
sort of like
okay.
drops
Yeah.
every like couple days. And then it just kind of carries on through like the month. And then maybe I would maybe on Instagram put like a stories up of like not necessarily something from the show, but maybe like from the theme sort of thing just to highlight, oh, this is like the theme of the month, and that's actually worked out quite well. So I think the nice thing about being an indie creator is that you can decide your sort of like content of like how you would like things to portray, and it's always fun just to like experiment really and just to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't have a business linked to it, so there's no pressure also. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, there's no,
Yeah.
like, business links to it, and I don't
Yeah.
I don't have any someone telling me what to do essentially from a sort of creative
Yeah.
point of view, which is quite nice that I
Yeah.
could just sort of, express myself in that way.
And I think it's actually a really smart idea to limit your podcast content to once a month, and but then keep the momentum going in this social media content around the subject of the podcast of that month, and get the conversation going. And I'm curious, is the conversation really happening on the socials then?
Yeah, so I would say one clip in particular that kinda went crazy viral on TikTok was, there was an episode that I did called, Raising Awareness for, and it was a roundtable discussion. So there I was very fortunate enough that I got to interview 3 people, at the same time. The guests were called, Josh Hill, Miyuki Panda, and, James Montgomery. And the reason why I interviewed these 3 people is because it was linked to a sort of charity racing event. And each of these people on the show had like a different cause they were championing for um, on the show. So that's why it was kind of like a nice way to like highlight like what these like particular causes meant to them. And those causes, one was about um, raising awareness for ADHD. The other one was for ADHD UK, which is one of the charities here. The other charity was Cancer Research UK, and the other one was the National Autistic Society. But one of the clips that sound bites that went viral was when one of the guests was talking about his brother who has Down syndrome, and it was a very such like a humbling touching story because he was, like, saying, like, "Oh, he's, like, one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet," kinda thing, and then it went very viral in a sense where, that post just received so many heartwarming, sweet messages of other people telling, their stories about, their loved ones who also have Down syndrome, so that was really, like, a beautiful, touching moment, just to, like, read all these, like, different, very fun stories about different people from, like, I guess around the UK or around the world. I'm not too sure where these comments were coming from, but I feel like most of them were coming from the United Kingdom. But regardless, it was just like it just like the comment section was just kept rolling, but it was just all like all love, all positivity, all good vibes. So I've had a couple of moments like that, but that one in
Oh,
particular really stood out.
okay. Oh, that sounds lovely. But do you also see the effect that has on downloads for your podcast? Or does
Interesting.
that
I've
not
had
make a big difference?
That's an interesting one, actually, and this is something when we were at that podcasting event, I spoke to, several people about, and I'm wondering if this is sort of like a wider trend where, social media sound bites for, like, I don't know, it could be for any podcast, seem to be doing very like well, but
Mhm.
then it doesn't necessarily. I mean, I still get a good okay amount of downloads. I would say my channel is more responsive on YouTube rather than the audio only experience is something I've noticed, but it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people just, like, watch, like, clips and engage and love it, but that doesn't necessarily I don't know, you could get, say, maybe, like, 100 or maybe, like, 1,000, like, views or even likes on a clip, but that doesn't necessarily translate to sort of, like, downloads and, like, the full episode, and that's something I've actually discussed, with people at the podcast event that we went to is, like, um, is it because of, like, people's maybe, like, attention span? Because I guess maybe one can argue that social media that's a different channel for a different purpose. So people just like to engage with like short form content. But then in order for people to engage with long form content, that's a different story. So no, it doesn't necessarily reflect
Mm.
just because a social clip is doing well. That doesn't mean like it will equally translate to like the same amount of like listens. But that's interesting because I guess that kind of like highlights the two different sort of channels of like
Mhm.
you sit down intentionally listening to a long form content versus like engaging in short form content. But I love it when people engage with both, regardless. It's still an
Yeah.
engagement with my pages.
Still, yeah, and I think engagement is far more important than downloads for your podcast. And also, yeah, you can ask the question: does it really matter? Because I also talk to a lot of podcasters that say, yeah, I do all this work to put my podcast, to share my podcast on social media, and to make the clips, but then it doesn't get me any more listens. And what you're saying is so true. Do you? Well, of course, you want more listens for your podcast, but if one of your shares on social goes viral and it goes to the right people mostly, then that's also very valuable. And maybe they will not go and listen to your podcast, but they have seen you. They know that you are there. They know that your podcast is there, and maybe the next episode or the next, they will be in a moment where they are open to listening to a full episode, and they will listen. So yeah, I think any visibility in whatever way is nice to have. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. I kind of treat those as like podcasting versus sort of like social media content creation as like two separate entities, and they're completely like two different like processes as well in terms of like how you create these two different things. But I would say I enjoy both very equally, but I agree. I feel like in this sort of modern day podcasting, it is a lot more challenging where you have to wear, I find, like, so many hats. It's not just like you write the script, you also do the interviews, you book the guests, and then the post-production stuff, it's not over after the recording ends.
No.
It's about the advertising, the social media clips, etcetera, and so forth. So it's like you're wearing all these, like, different hats. So it's interesting, like, the concept of podcasting, especially as indie creators, um, you tend to wear multiple hats.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, yeah. And if you do get a sponsor or some other way of monetization, then maybe also as an indie podcaster, you could hire people to help you with the hats that you really don't like. But
Yeah, that
yeah,
is true,
yeah,
exactly. I think I'm just because I'm still very kind of new in the whole, like, podcasting scope, and I definitely still wanna continue. I think I just wanna continue to sort of build, like, create more stories and build the profile and just see where that takes me. Because ultimately, the main reason and intention of me doing this is I love storytelling, and I love having people on, to help, like, sort of share these sort of stories with.
yeah. Where do you find your guests?
Um, it's a mix of different places. So I would say the very first guest I ever had on season 1 was he's the brother of like one of my like really old friends, one of my longest friends from university actually. So I met him through her, and then through him, I then met a few other people that kind of became sort of guests on my show. And then I also had someone on that we used to kind of work in the same photography studio together and things like that. So it's kind of like a mix of places, really, where it's like people that I know who know people. I also had a guest on that I met at another podcasting event as well. So it's only ever been people that I've met in person, whether I've known them like well, or I've known them like for very briefly, or whether I've known them through like sort of mutual connection. So it's just sort of like these like chain like sort of like links of different people. But it's always been like in-person encounters.
Okay. So always networking, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And I'm wondering also because you say you've had some social media content that went viral, and the podcast is also obviously getting some traction. Do you have also people coming to you and asking, "Can I be a guest? Can I tell my story on your show?"
I had when I was at the event actually where I had someone come up to me who works for a I believe it was a PR firm, and then she was like, "Oh, we're looking we're always like getting in touch with like all different podcasts, and if here's my business card, and if you would like to have like people like some of my clients on your show." So that's definitely I've had something like that recently, for example. But I also think it's always nice. I'm always very like open of like what kind of guests to come on. But I would say the only thing that as long as I could see, because if to me it's about the storytelling. If I could see like the sort of like hook of the story, like oh, what makes this interesting, what makes this topic quite special, that would be my sort of only criteria.
And you record online, or do you invite people to a studio or?
So I tend to book a recording studio
Okay,
actually.
cool.
That was it was a recommendation that I got from somebody, so it's the only place that I ever record as well. I mean, they
Oh,
have various locations around London, but it's in terms of like the production company itself, it's the same one that I always record with. Like they have like a great team that works there. I always get the audio and visuals sent back to me very quickly. It's good quality. There are locations that are quite easy to get to for myself and my guests. 'Cause that was also very important that, it's easy to get there via transport links.
yeah,
I think the main reason why I wanted the studio is just because I did want that sort of in-person. Because if everyone's in London or at least, like, somewhere near Greater London and can come down to London, I just like that sort of, like, in-person
yeah.
interaction, especially if you do have the advantage of actually not being so far with each other. But I've also done a remote recording where someone was in Bali at the time as well. So I think I like having the options
Okay. Yeah.
because you could do like if someone isn't in the same country as you, you could definitely set up like a remote recording session. But if they happen to be in the same place as you, it's always fun to like schedule in person ones. So I think that's what I love about podcasting is that flexibility. So I've done both, but if people are in the same location as me and are willing to come meet me, then perfect. Let's do it in
Yeah.
person.
Okay. So you do invest as an indie podcaster in that studio. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think as well because, the keyword there, investment, that obviously also costs money, so that's also
Yes.
why I kind of limit, a certain amount of recording sessions per year, so on average so
Yeah.
far, like last year, I did, 3 recording sessions in the studio. This year, I've also done about 3 recording sessions in the studio, so, from, like, sort of a, financial point of view, that's very doable, but if I was a weekly show, for example, where I would have people on, and if I was funding this myself, that would be quite a challenge.
Yeah.
So I think that's also partly why I decided to go on more of a seasonal basis, is to not only focus on, like, the stories and like sort of greater length detail. But it's also that, yeah, being the challenges of being an indie podcaster is that you are by yourself. You don't have like big funding or sponsors, or you don't work for a company necessarily that backs you for this. Is also being you could still tell these stories and like produce series, but it's just a case about, you know, kind of like being clever with your money as well at the same time.
And would you be looking in the future to find maybe a sponsor?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, definitely. I think the key for me now is just to really continue trying to build producing more episodes, creating that more niche and like trying to get more engagement on social media. until I feel, I guess, in a position to be like approaching sponsors. I think I could be in a position to approach them now, but I feel like I want to be like even more confident, being like, okay, I'm ready to, for people to invest in
Yeah.
this sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fingers crossed that you find
Yeah.
the perfect sponsor for your show. Um, what has this podcast done for you personally? Has it taught you certain things or has it changed you?
I think one of the things it's taught me is the work that goes into it, like, as I mentioned there earlier, like, wearing all, like, the different hats, I find there's, like, sort of, like, 3 core sort of phases where you have, like, the pre-production, the actual recording session, and then, like, the post-production, and then, like, the work that goes behind, sort of the before and after phase, and I think that was definitely one of the biggest, lessons, but I think as well, even though I launched in September 2025, I actually started doing more like, I guess you could say market research all the way back in like the end of 2024. And there was my reasons why I really took my time with the launch is because I'd never done this before. And I really just wanted to learn about like the art of podcasting, if you will. So like researching like the littlest things from like the different microphone types, I sent out surveys to people to kind of get an idea of like people's listening habits. So before even like considering like what niche and what genre I wanted to go into, I really just took my time in like learning about it. So that was one of the biggest lessons really is just like learning about all the different stages that go into producing a single episode for sure.
Yeah, wow, I'm impressed because I hear a lot of podcasters, whether they are independent or doing it from a business as a marketing tool, that don't work as thorough as you did in the preparation, and that they just think, oh yeah, I'll buy a microphone and I'll start talking, and then we will see. But that's not how it works.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
not. But I also think that kind of comes with a habit of my sort of day job. Like I've worked in like sort of creative media industries, being a writer for many years, and there's always a lot of like protocols and steps. One of my oldest jobs from back in the day would require actually did require interviewing people as well, but, you would have to, like there's a lot of prep work that goes into that, in some cases, guest agreements, so I was already quite aware of those kind of, like, protocols as well, because I have heard from other people where, episodes would kind of get, like, barred because there wasn't, like, any sort of, like, checks beforehand or no questions were sent beforehand, so people were kind of a bit caught off guard, and then like episodes weren't released as a result. So I think from like that sort of, I guess, media training or creative training that I had from previous jobs or my current job as well, I kind of knew just to like be a bit more thorough with like certain steps, even like the littlest things from just like even just approaching the way that I would approach guests, which is a big one.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm thinking you're doing a really good job, yeah.
Mm. Thank you.
Maybe one day, if you're liking it so much and you went to the podcast show, that also tells me you're really into the podcasting, thing. Maybe one day it'll become your job.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I think that's the key thing here is that I enjoy it. I think the regardless of what you do for a sort of passion project is that you have to be passionate about it and enjoy it. So the key thing is I enjoy doing this.
Yeah, yeah, that's always the key. I think if you're not enjoying it, you better quit because, well, you will quit probably.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly. It has to be fun. Like that's the main
yeah,
thing for doing this is that like yeah, and that I guess that question is like why are you doing this? Well, simple because it's fun.
yeah, yeah. That's a very important aspect of podcasting. Yes, the fun. All right, and yeah, in those 2 seasons now, have you had any bloopers or I don't want to say mistakes, but learning moments?
Yeah, I would say in the very first recording, I like butchered the name of my own show, which is like wasn't a great way to start. Yeah. So I was just I just froze. I was just like I couldn't even say because I always have like the same sort of intro whenever I introduce the episode, and I just completely forgot the name of my own show. And of course we edit that out of yeah, no, you always just have like fun like little blooper moments and things like that for sure. But that was definitely one of them that comes to mind where I just like, hello, we are at I don't quite remember now. I'm so sorry.
You should keep those for later, maybe do a
Yeah,
blooper episode.
true, true.
Yeah,
That is a good point, actually.
yeah,
Yeah, because I guess with AI, it's all about being like polished.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
think people want that sort of like human touch where like whoopsies. I sometimes keep like certain scenes in where we would just like laugh about like certain moments and stuff like that to keep it a bit more authentic. Like
Yeah,
I don't keep it like too polished either. It was like, oh
yeah.
wait, no, that was a funny moment, or you would kind of like go like slightly off topic in one of my most recent episodes that just came out where I got to interview somebody who is a beauty queen pageant. Super lovely, super great episode. But at one point, we kind of went in a sort of off-topic discussion about what our favorite cakes were, for example. So it's nice to kind of keep that sort of like element where like the conversation doesn't have to be like too Q&A and too strict in that sense. I think people wanna listen to sort of those, like, funny, like, off chat authentic moments, like, not you don't have to go too much off topic, but, I guess that kinda gives it that sort of natural, like, element, and
Yeah.
when people listen to conversations, you want it to sound natural.
Yes, you do, you do. I also when I'm editing, I leave in a lot of the ums. I do cut some out, but, yeah, we're humans, we say, "Oh." Yeah. So, have you had any, top moments yet that you say, "Ah, this one is one I should frame and remember forever"?
I would say maybe the, raising awareness for roundtable discussion episode I had because
Yeah,
I think you definitely have, in some ways, I would say it's a completely different ball game, from an interview viewer's point of view when you're interviewing on a one-on-one basis, versus, like, curating a sort of discussion panel of, like, 3 other people next to you. So I think that was probably one of the things I probably one of my greater highlights, of
okay,
doing the
yeah.
show is, like, having sort of like a round table 'cause, apart from that episode, all the other episodes were sort of like more like one-on-one discussions, but I think I would love to do more, roundtable discussions in the future for sure. But I think the art of roundtable discussion, it's a very I find that it's its own category on its own because there's so many other elements there in terms of, like, keeping that discussion like, naturally flowing, but still, making sure, like, we kinda move on to, like, the next topic because when you have so many different people with so many different viewpoints and personalities, you need to make sure to kind of, like, maybe rein it in from time to
Yeah,
time, because, you know, sometimes you get excited, especially when there's, like, a big group, you're like, "Oh, wow, wow," but, I think there are definitely different more challenges there when hosting a roundtable, but at the same time, I was probably the most proud of that one because of that element of kind of, like, curating a sort of, like, multi-discussion panel.
these roundtables and panels, they're in a league of their own, I think. I've only done one, and actually I'm doing my second one, this afternoon.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, and I remember last time I was sitting at the table, and I wanted to get into the discussion also, because they were saying so many interesting things, and I always had to remember, "No, you're the host. My role was to make them stick to the subject, keep them in line a little bit, and make sure we don't stay with one topic for too long and move on to the next. And then ask some questions in between, and then just let them do the talking and the discussing. But the discussion was so interesting. I wanted to get in there all the time. I was like, no, you cannot be quiet. So I'm hoping this afternoon, yeah, the second time. I hope I will have less editing work, it being the second time.
Yeah, good luck with this
Yeah.
afternoon.
So if you had one golden tip for someone who would like to start a podcast right now, what would that be?
I would say find a sort of niche or subject that you're passionate about, because I feel like it could be something that's like super niche. I don't know, maybe say if you want to do like a history podcast, or if you want something that is a little bit like with my show, it focuses on sort of one area but broad in terms of the type of guests that you could have on. So that's probably the first thing maybe you should think about, is like what kind of like genre would you like to get into, and what are your interests, because I think you're the one who's going to be creating this, and it's something that you are going to have to enjoy. So I would say pick a subject that you enjoy first. And then maybe if there are similar ones that are already out there, listen to those, just to sort of get like sort of inspiration of what's already out there. And I guess the second thing is just to like maybe, if you get a chance, like talk to friends and family and ask them like, hey, when you listen to podcasts, how do you listen to them? How often do you listen to them? Just get a gauge, like a rough gauge of like listening habits. Do you watch podcasts? Do you listen podcasts? Do you listen to your podcasts on a commute? Because you'd be surprised like how useful little questions like that are, to
Mhm.
kinda help you prepare yourself for the show. And I
Yeah.
guess the second thing is just kind of like, you don't have to do a studio if you don't want to. Like, you could completely choose, it's up to you, whatever it is. You also don't have to splurge in, like, the most expensive equipment even at home. Like, my equipment was just, like, discounted on Amazon, for example, so you don't also have to have necessarily, yeah, the most expensive gear either. Just get, like, equipment that works, a
Mhm.
laptop that works, and you're good to go, really.
Yeah, I recorded my first 7 episodes on my phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As long as you have that preparation beforehand in
Mhm.
terms of, like, what you're talking about, then you're good to go. It doesn't have to be super fancy. The studio thing was just a sort of a personal choice because of the area that I live and how frequent I do it, which isn't that often. So,
Mhm.
but then, yeah, it kind of varies on your own personal circumstance, but you don't have to splurge. You could easily podcast on a budget.
Yeah, so true, so true. Yeah, great tips. Thank you. So, I have one more question for you before we finish off. I always ask my guests because I this will be episode 199.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, but I want to make a lot more. I want to talk to a lot more podcasters. So can you recommend me someone that I could also invite for this podcast?
I'm thinking not so much, I don't know a particular person, but a particular type of guest. I'm wondering, I don't know if you've had someone like this on yet, but I think a comedian would be quite interesting, actually. Someone who does maybe like stand-up comedy, just to kind of hear maybe, because a lot of comedians also have podcasts these
Yeah, they
days
do.
as
They
well.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it'd be maybe nice to kind of hear stories about like how sort of like the creation of like how they sort of tell jokes, and maybe how they feel within this certain like sort of climate about cancel culture and comedy, because that is a humongous thing at the moment as well. So I think a comedian could be a very interesting one for you.
I've never had a comedian on. I've had someone who organizes comedy shows.
Mm.
So maybe I can reach out to him again and ask for some connections to Belgian comedians. That is, but if you have any connections to comedians that are in your area,
Yeah.
I can you can always send me.
Yeah, no, of course. I
Yeah.
don't know any like I go to comedy shows, but I don't know
Uh-huh.
any of them
Yeah.
personally. I went to see Ricky Gervais last night actually
Yeah.
in London.
That
He was
might.
like
Oh
testing out his
wow.
new material. I know. It was I got like a free ticket from a friend, but maybe that might be a bit too up
Yeah.
there when it comes to
Uh-huh. Yeah. They don't
uh
need to be famous. They're just
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Someone up and
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah. Okay, if you can think of someone, let me know. Yeah, and I will check around here in Belgium. Thank you so so much for this really inspiring conversation and for your time. And maybe we will see each other next year at the podcast show.
Yes, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy that you chose to spend your time listening to me and my guest. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you don't want to miss any episodes, just click follow. You will recognize the English spoken episodes by the little country flag in the episode title, which tells you where my guest is from. If you would like to do my guest and me a huge favor, then please give both of our podcasts a 5-star review. And we also love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to send us a message. You can find all our contact details in the episode description. Till next time!